Hello, everyone. My name is Allison Alexander. I'm the clinical supervisor for occupational therapy at Nemours Children's Health. And also with me on this project is Megan Weber, who is a physical therapist by background and is the manager of our therapy services team in Milford, Delaware. And today we're excited to share with you sensory supports, tools, trainings, and inclusive practice. A little bit about my clinical background to start. So I have a post-professional doctorate in occupational therapy and have provided some direct pediatric treatment experiences in outpatient, inpatient rehab, acute care, early intervention, and school-based settings. And through providing services in all of these settings, one of the things that I found is that there really is a need for sensory tools in all of these areas and some pretty significant barriers in being able to provide those tools when kids are demonstrating areas of need. The scope of this project was fairly broad, and I do want to pause and thank the Nemours Community Funding Program, who helped to provide the funding to make this full project possible. But the idea was to provide resources and education to support sensory processing across academic and community environments. Our partners for this project include the Indian River School District, Dickinson School, Cook Elementary, Meadowood School, as well as the Kent County Library. The problem statement that we start with is pretty staggering. 1 in 6 school-aged children demonstrate atypical sensory processing skills. The rate of autism has continued to rise, and 1 in 32 children now has a diagnosis of autism. So these things are progressing in our society and in our schools, but accessing the supports that sometimes these children need can face some tangible challenges. So this matters because the amount of sensory supplies varies from school to school, from community setting to community setting, which makes it difficult to implement sensory interventions without the materials and supplies one might need. Peer modeling matters. It feels a little weird to be the only one in your class who's using a fidget, so having universally available sensory supports helps to decrease the stigma associated with utilizing these techniques, and every child can benefit from sensory input. So even those without definitive sensory processing needs, there has been studies on classroom performance and have found better engagement and attention when utilizing a sensory-based approach. So the gross overview of this initiative was to provide high quality and reusable sensory supports that typically aren't available in standard classrooms. The idea behind this is that a lot of times kids will get a fidget spinner or something along these lines, or a calm down bottle that can be used a few times but are often thrown away. The idea behind this project was providing some of the better stuff, some of the stuff that can be used a little bit longer, and certainly some of the items that are more needed for kids with higher support needs. So commonly distributed, we have noise canceling headsets and fidgets, but not as commonly distributed are some of the items that we're going to be talking about today. One of the things I have here is a survey link. If possible, I would like you to pause the video right now and take this survey. It's an initial survey, and we'll be following up with a secondary survey in just a few weeks. What we're hoping to do is, as a result of us getting the funding for this project, we're going to be doing a report out, and you guys filling out this survey lets us show the impact of providing these materials to our different settings. So not required, but we would encourage participation if you guys are willing to participate in this survey. Another quick plug that I have for you guys is related to photo requests. So as I mentioned, we will be doing a report out to Nemours on this project. And if possible, we would love to include photos of either the sensory tools in space, ideally photos of children using the tools. We do require a photo release, and the instructions for that is in the email that also embedded this video, or photos of teachers with the tools. So anything that you are willing to send, again, nothing is required, but anything that you're willing to send helps us to kind of prove a little bit more to help that this project aims to give. So if you are able to send any photos, my email address is listed above. And if you are sending a photo of a child, we do need to have a photo release in place. There are two different versions, one for if a child is a Nemours patient in any regards or a non-Nemours patient. So not required, but we would appreciate it if you have any families or if you're close with any children in your classroom and families who would be interested and willing to submit a photo that we can use to show all of the good work that's been done. So I'm going to talk next about the conceptual foundations of sensory processing. Sensory processing is tough because somebody can present overreactive, someone else can present underreactive, and a lot of people can present in between. So one of the most common analogies we like to use within occupational therapy is thinking about our sensory systems as a bucket. Some people are born with big buckets, and that means that they can fill up with a lot of water. They can fill up with a lot of different sensory input before something becomes overwhelming. Some of us have a small bucket, so even a little bit of a noxious or non-preferred sensory input can lead to an overflow, which could be overstimulation, a shutdown, a meltdown, something of those lines. So we want to think about the sensory affordances or what is available within our environment like a bucket. And we want to think about how we're able to modify the flow of the water, or in this analogy, the sensory things that are in this child's environment to make sure our bucket is full but not overflowed. The other piece of this is that if you are someone with this big bucket where it takes a lot for you to overflow, well, you might have a harder time doing something like paying attention because the amount of water flowing into your system, or the amount of sensory input that you're getting is perceived as less. So even though someone else might get their wiggles out, for lack of a better term, by going out to recess and playing for a little bit, there's other kids who are going to have a harder time sitting still um, after having that exact same amount of time for play. So we want to think about each child as an individual, and we want to think about providing these sensory tools in a focused way that allows for support and allows for a little bit more of a level playing ground when it comes to classroom engagement and attention. A few considerations I'll give when using sensory supports. One thing I teach every child is a fidget is a tool and not a toy. And I leave this to the discretion of our teachers and educators. When a fidget is being used like a toy, it's not a tool anymore. And so I think when you're providing these supports, teaching the students that and talking about the difference, there's a difference between fidgeting with something small in front of you, one of those little tactile mazes, versus flinging something around in the air or throwing it at a friend. So we want to make sure that we're using these in a focused manner, not in a way that is disruptive to our classmates or our learning. A note of that, sometimes when provided these materials, a kid can often look like they're not paying attention if they're playing with their putty or their fidget. I encourage you guys to reflect upon the learning that is happening to determine if the fidget is helpful and simply they're having less visual attention to the lesson, but they're still getting all of the information in, or is it a matter of it is turning into a more play-based situation, and you and your classrooms and your environments will be the ones to be able to determine that. If someone's unsafe with a tool, they require direct supervision. Sensory supports work best when they're available for everyone to use because it does take away the stigma of being the only one with a fidget or, let's say, adaptive seats. And a final consideration is that not all sensory supports require equipment. Sometimes things like dimming the lights or providing a movement break can be helpful for everyone in the classroom. So I'm going to go through a sensory kit breakdown of what's included in the kit, as well as some considerations for each tool. As far as the selection of each item goes, there were a lot of factors that came into what was delivered to your site. So we looked at age, relative needs, funding considerations, as well as other factors. If you do find that we've given you an item that you don't have a use for, I'm going to plug my email in there again, and I'll ask that you shoot me an email because I would be happy to redelegate this item to others if it would be better used in a different setting. We did intentionally choose these items to be long-term and reusable items intended for the community and classroom-based setting. So not entirely recommended or suggested for kids to take these and bring these home, but we really had the idea of having these available in the classroom so that they can be used for a prolonged period of time. And a final note that we do encourage direct supervision when you're using these sensory supports to make sure kids are using them in a safe manner. So I'll start by talking about our adaptive seating options of the wiggle disc. Please note that for the wiggle discs, and soon I'll be talking about a blue wedge, these may have come partially inflated. So please make sure that you are inflating these if they are a little bit lackluster in terms of the amount of air in them upon arrival. These don't need to be completely filled with air. They shouldn't be as tight as, let's say, a basketball, but they shouldn't be so loose that you're sitting on them and feel the surface of your chair beneath you. So another piece of this is that you can kind of see how you do with this. And some kids might like a seat that's more filled versus less filled. So experimenting with that, I think, would be helpful within your classroom. There's typically a bumpy side and a flat side. They can be used on either side, just depending on personal preference. And the most common way we think about this is sitting on the floor, but you can also use it at the bottom of a chair, just sitting down typically, and placing your feet on this wiggle cushion, and it can allow you to do some bouncing of your feet, just as an alternative way to use this item. The next thing I have is from Fun and Function, and it's a wedge cushion. So this is something, once again, that is something that you'll need to inflate to get the most proper use out of it. And this one works in sort of a twofold ways. Once again, it can be used on the bumpy or on the smooth side, but this is specifically a tool that works well for those with poor posture, as well as those with sensory needs. So if you're noticing a kid who constantly slouches at their desk or leans on back or has to lean to the side, you will be very surprised to provide this seat and see what an immediate impact it has on posture. Once again, this is something that can be over or underinflated based on personal preference, but this is something that does provide a little bit of a wiggle to it, but more notably, it has a large impact on posture, which goes in with the general fatigue of sitting for a school day. Perhaps one of my favorite things in the box for you guys is called a sit and twist cushion. This is a cushion that sits discreetly on a seat. It can also fit easily in a backpack to transfer between rooms, and it'll pivot about 120 degrees in a quiet manner. So it lets you do a little swivel, almost like you're sitting in an office chair, but in a standard classroom chair. Excuse me. Again, it allows for subtle input. It's smooth, and it can be used over a stool or a chair, and can also be used sitting on the floor. We only have a few sites who have gotten this one just because of the age and size requirements, but we have some scoop chairs. These allow children to rock back and forth. The max weight for these are 50 pounds, but they can be stacked together for easy storage. And this will allow the child sitting it to do a little rock back and forth motion. The wobble chair, the ones that we've provided are these 18-inch ones. The max weight for these are 120 pounds, and these can wobble in multiple directions. So these are something that might have crossed across your feed or your page, but really stays in place nicely and just lets the kid kind of lean to their side or front or back while they're doing their lessons. Another thing we've provided to certain sites is a weighted lap pad. The one we have is for kids who are 75 pounds or greater. And the biggest things with this that we want to highlight is to not lay these over your face or mouth, and that these are wipeable. A few of our sites has also gotten a spin chair. This is a surprising in how much it can support. It can actually support up to 220 pounds, which I looked at it at first and said, no way, no way could I sit on that. But then I did, and it's quite a fun experience. You want to make sure that you're using this on a firm or stable surface. So you don't want to put this on like any sort of hill or incline or anything like that. And this is interesting that it provides both rotary or rotational input and vertical input, both of which is processed differently by our sensory system. So as the child's spinning on it, they'll go in a circle, but you'll also feel or see that there's a little uphill and downhill portion to this spin. Kids really are a fan of this. This is one I definitely would encourage direct supervision with. But it's really nice, and perhaps a kid who has that bigger bucket and needs more input, sitting and spinning for a few minutes might be something that they can do in between lessons, or prior to a lesson to help with their attention and focus overall. Another thing that I have, and I know fidgets and slime and all of that has gotten a lot more popular over the past few years, I do have some color changing thinking putty. So this is a pretty nice texture of a putty. It shouldn't stick onto hands or simple school materials, but you will want to avoid touching fabrics with it. It's color changing, so it'll change from like a light blue to a dark blue or vice versa. And it comes in a small aluminum tin, so I just encourage you sealing it in between uses for best results. The next thing we'll have is some pencil toppers, a few different varieties here. These can stick on the back of a standard pencil and you're able to spin the gear or whatever it is on the object itself and to provide a little bit of some tactile input or engagement while other things are going on. I want to highlight to not permit chewing on these, but that they do allow for some subtle fidgeting and work on standard pens and pencils. The next thing I have is chair bands. So these go as pictured at the bottom of a chair or at a desk. A child can place their feet on top of these and allow them to kind of bounce or move with the band back or forth to give a little bit more input or resistance to some movement. You can also stack these to provide a firmer input if you need to. So if a kid is really going at it with one, you could always add 2 or 3 to a chair to give more resistance. The next thing we have are spinner rings. So these can be worn around the finger. And they're just a nice, they go around in a full circle, but they're not as distracting, I think, as a fidget spinner, which is a lot easily turns into a toy versus a tool. So you'll have some fidget rings in there as well. You'll also have some marble mesh containers. These are ones that I really like just because of how simple they are. It's just a little marble and a piece of mesh that you can sit and use your hands to bring from one side to the other. It's a noise-free option, but I do want to encourage you guys not to allow any sort of chewing on the mesh, as the marble itself would be a choking hazard. There will also be some of these squish mazes. These mazes have a definitive start and end point, but gives a little bit of a focus to fidgeting. So I'll call that task focused fidgeting. And as I mentioned earlier, we just need to talk and analyze for children if this is a good fit for them and they're able to retain information while doing this, or if it's a distraction. And that'll be at the guidance and judgment of yourself as educators to see what is working and what's not. Please do not pure spite or chew these, and there are a few options available within the kits. Next, these are pretty popular these days, but we have tactile strips that can be placed on a desk or a laptop. They're a sticker surface, so they should lift up and down fairly easily, and they have a sand-like texture to them. Just running your fingers across the surface of these are typically how they're used in a school-based setting. A really nice item that we have are these reading strips. These specifically are helpful for those with dyslexia or any sort of visual disorder. It's also very helpful post-concussion or any brain injury. These are small strips that can go directly on top of the paper to help highlight the exact line that a kid is reading from. So a really awesome tool that's very helpful for many kiddos for keeping their space while they're working on reading or writing. I provided one size for these, but know that they're commercially available in multiple sizes if they are a particularly good fit for a child. Along those lines, I have color overlays. So think about this like the reading strip, but for an entire paragraph. So for somebody who loses focus easily, whether it be on an activity or a worksheet, this can highlight the area that they need to focus on. Good for those with ADHD, dyslexia, Erland syndrome, post-concussion, or any sort of visual or accommodative disorder. There's different colors. I say try, if it's an effective strategies, sometimes trialing different colors. There are colors that sometimes will work better for students. And I want to say that there's less adjustment compared to reading strips for this, as well as multiple size options. As we're talking about reading, some reading and writing resources, another resource that I like to recommend is a website called printablepaper.net. This is a website, I have no affiliation with them, but they have every sort of adaptive writing paper that you can print out for free. So things like low vision paper or bright line paper, or even special graph paper for doing math problems. These can be very nice supportive things to provide to help students better be able to perform reading and writing tasks. Another thing I'll have in certain kits are weighted pencils. These are about an ounce each, but they help work well for a few different things. If you're somebody who automatically uses too much pressure on a pencil, this might automatically stop you from using some of that pressure. If you use too little, it's going to automatically give you a little bit more. It can be used on a pen or pencil. And it gives your body more feedback as you're writing. So every stroke that you make with your pen, your body just gets a little bit more feedback about what went what went on with the formation of that from a motor planning standpoint. These can be used on a pen or pencil, but ask your students if they feel fatigue about using them for a longer period of time. That weight is a consideration that could impact fatigue during prolonged writing tasks. The last thing that we've got included today is emotional support. It's a breathing ball. So this will expand and relax as you pull and close it, or as you throw it in the air, it'll get bigger and get smaller. So this can provide a good visualization for deep breathing. Occasionally we'll pull it apart and bring it back together in and out with our deep breaths. It can be used for a dynamic movement break, so throwing it along the classroom, and it can be used individually or in a group-based setting. The last few things I want to end with is that we provided these materials today that are equipment based, but there's also a lot of things that don't require equipment. So these are some suggestions I have. And again, every student is going to be different and every classroom is going to be different. There's not a one size fits all approach for sensory. There's really a one size fits one, and figuring out what that size is. So adjusting the lighting, it could be sometimes brightening the light, sometimes dimming the light, looking at fluorescent lights or fluorescent light covers, using natural light, and seating students away from glare. Sometimes also we talk about taking away light. Sometimes more light can be helpful for attention. So getting a lamp or sitting a child close to a light could be helpful for certain written tasks. Movement breaks, these can be done individually or as a whole class, but things like stretching, doing wall push-ups, marching in place, some desk size exercises. Something I like to do is if there's armrests on the chair, pushing up and kind of floating our body in space for a second could be a nice thing to do while staying in place, and some quick classroom jobs like handing out papers. Breathing exercises, we might talk about balloon breathing, box breathing. For younger kids, we talk about smelling the flower and blowing out the candle for a visualization of the deep breath in and the long breath out. Typically, we want our breath in to be about 2 to 3 times the amount of time that we're doing our breath out. So a deep breath in being longer and our breath out being a little bit shorter. Some scheduled regulation breaks. So brief breaks built into the routine before dysregulation occurs. This could be doing something like yoga or animal walks, reducing our background noise. One of the things I'm actually realizing I failed to mention, but I have included some noise canceling headphones in these kits as well. So using those noise canceling headphones when needed, or doing things like closing your classroom door, minimizing conversations, lowering volume, and sometimes the use of something called brown noise, similar to white noise, but a little bit fuzzier of a sound, is helpful for seated attention. Flexible positioning is another option, so allowing someone to stand or kneel or sit or lay on their belly or change locations while they work could all be ways of providing different types of input, as well as heavy work opportunities. So these are things that require a lot of physical effort. So maybe carrying books, pushing chairs, pushing desks, delivering materials, stacking or organizing supplies, things that are having somebody do a lot of physical work. And a note to check in with your class to see what strategies work best for them. You might have one kid who really benefits from heavy work opportunities and another kid where a breathing break or even putting on those noise canceling headphones for a few minutes might be something that's helpful. It's really a little bit of see what works and also monitor what's being used as a tool versus as a toy to make sure that they are still doing their most important job of being a student. Here are some references from the some of the statistics that were presented earlier in this presentation. I do want to encourage you to reach out to me if you do have any questions while using these materials. Again, a very large thank you for your participation. I'm very happy that we're able to get these supports in more places. I will be reaching out in a few weeks with the post survey. Again, the survey as well as the photos are not required, but if you are able to do it, it helps me submitting this to the community funding program to show the work that we've done with this. So thank you for your participation. Please reach out if you have any questions, and I hope you enjoy using these materials and getting a little bit more engagement and flexibility in your classrooms with them. Thank you.